Welcome to the second lesson in the Pandas for Beginners tutorial series. In this lesson, we'll check out how we can read CSV and Excel files using Pandas. So I have my Pandas tutorial folder open here from the previous video, and I have renamed the dataset file to data.csv. I've also created Excel version of the data.csv file. We'll launch Jupyter Lab. So I'll just open up command prompt in this folder and activate the virtual environment. Okay, activate, there we go, and launch Jupyter Lab. Now if you don't have the dataset, or you don't really know what's going on with the virtual environment in Jupyter Lab, you can check out the first video in this tutorial series. With the Jupyter Lab open, if you want to zoom in and out of the notebook, you can hold on Control and use the mouse wheel. So in the previous video, we left off here with importing pandas. So I'll just run this code cell, and in the next code cell, we'll start with reading our CSV file. So to read a CSV file using pandas, we use the read CSV function. So I'll just say pd.read CSV, and in here we supply the path to our file. So in this case it's just data.csv, since the notebook is in the same folder as our data.csv file. So I'll just run this cell using shift enter, and we get our data set. So you can see the country, description, designation, etc. And if you scroll to the end of the dataset, you'll see the row and column count. Now you'll notice that Pandas was able to figure out that the first row is actually a header. But what if this weren't a header and Pandas picked it up as one? How could we tell Pandas that this is not a header? Well, in that case, we would use the header parameter. So I can say header equals none. And if I run this, you'll see that country, description, designation is no longer a header for our dataset. And if I want to explicitly tell Pandas that the first row is a header, I can say header equals 0, where 0 is the row, so it's the first row. And I'll just do shift enter, and you can see we get the first row as a header once again. Let's just change this to 2 and see what happens. One thing to notice is this unnamed column has a value of 0 for our header, has a value of 0 for this first line in our data set, and has a value of 1 for Spain, and then 2 for this line, 3 for, and so on. Let's just run this, and you'll see that Spain, that line that was 1, has now become our column labels, and our dataset actually starts from 2, so it's ignored everything that was above it. So I'm just gonna remove this so that we get our original dataset. Okay, there we go. Next, let's see how we can select which columns we wish to load. So the way we do that is using the use calls parameter, and this takes a list of the columns we wish to import. So I'll just say country, description, and designation. Well, and if I run this, you can see we get the 3 columns specified. Let's see how we can rename our columns here. So to rename columns, we use the names parameter, and it also takes in a list, and it's basically the list of values you want to change the column names to. So for the first one, I'll say it's A, second one B for simplicity, D, E, F. So how many columns do we have? We have 11 columns. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, cool. And if I hit enter, you can see our column names are now A, B, C, and so on. Something to note is our first row is now a line in our data set, which is not really what we want. our data should actually start from this row here. So the way we can get rid of this first line is to just say header equals 0, and if I run this, you can see that line is now removed. It's basically telling us that the first line in our dataset is a header, and we want to rename that header to these values. If I remove these, so we get our original import line, and I just say dot d types, you can actually see the data type of the columns. So country is an object, which just means string. Price is a float 64, points is a int 64, and so on. If you want to specifically tell pandas what the data type of a specific column is, then we can do that with the d type parameter. So I can say d type equals, and then we supply our data types as a dictionary. So the key is the column name, and the value is the data type we want. So I'll just say, let's say price is of type string, and if I just do d types here and hit enter, you can see price is now an object as well, which is pandas way of saying string. So let's say so our points is currently an int 64, so let's say we want to convert it to a float. So I can do points np dot int float 64, and so here I'm just using the numpy float 64 data type. I've also imported numpy here, and if I run this, you'll see that points is now a float 64. So pandas uses numpy data types, which is why I've used np.float64. And you can also get ints using int32 and so on. Cool. So I'll get rid of all of this. Now let's say we want to import the first 10 rows only. How can we do that? Well, we can say end rows equals 10, and if I run this, you'll see that we get the first 10 rows only. We can store this data in a variable, so I'll just say data equals and pd.readcsv and my csv file, and now this variable data will have the data that pandas imports. Cool. So that's reading the data. So that's reading a csv file in pandas. Next, let's see how we can read an excel file. It's basically the same. I'll just say pd.read excel and supply my excel file. If I hit shift enter, you see I get an error. It says missing optional dependency, open excel, use pip or conda to install. So basically to read excels I need this extra library, extra package, so I'm just gonna install that. If you're in Jupyter Lab and you wish to install a pip package, you can do an exclamation mark pip install open excel. So normally you wouldn't be able to install things in Jupyter. You'd have to cancel this session, install it, and then open Jupyter Lab again. However, with this exclamation mark, you're basically telling Jupyter that you wish to run this command in the console. So I'll just do this, shift enter, and it's going to take a little while. Once done, we can try this again. And if you want to get rid of this cell, you can just have it selected and press DD. So that's the letter D twice. Okay, cool. So it looks like our Excel data is loaded, and you can see a preview here. So this Excel file had only one sheet, which is what it imported here. But let's say you have an Excel file with multiple sheets. How do you import the sheet you want? Well, you can use the sheet name parameter. So that's just sheet underscore name and equals, and you can supply the sheet you wish to import. So let's just say sheet 1. So in this case, the sheet name is this. So I'll just paste that in and hit shift enter. and we should get our data set once again. There we go. If you wish to import more than one sheet, you can supply this as a list. So you'd have all your sheet names in here, and you can also use integers to specify your sheet name. So I can say the first sheet using 0 or the second sheet using 1 and so on. Say 0, shift enter, you can see we get the same thing. Now all of the parameters that we have seen with read CSV is also available for this read Excel. So you'll be able to specify the headers, the columns you want to import and so on, using the same parameter names and same values. One more thing I wish to show you is if you actually have a look at your data, you'll see that there's the first 5 rows and then this dot 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 and then the last 5 rows. The reason Pandas does this is to save space, right? Basically this is a 150k row file. It's going to take up a lot of space if it printed it all out. So it just shows us a few. If you wanted to see all of the rows, you can set an option in Pandas. So we can do pd.set option, and I'll just say display.max rows and none. And if I run this cell and then rerun the read Excel cell, you can see it gives us all of the rows that are in our data set. Now this also happens with columns. We can't really see it in this data set, but if there are too many columns, then Pandas will truncate them as well. So it'll just show you a few a few more. And if you want to see all of the columns, then you can do something similar with the max columns. So I'll just copy this line and paste it down here and just change this max rows to max columns. And if I run the cells again, in this case you won't really see anything, but if you had a case where there were multiple columns, then you'd be able to see all of the columns. Cool. You can also supply a number here, so the number of rows in your data set, or basically more, to see all the rows in your data set. That's all for this lesson. Thanks for watching and happy coding.